Well, good morning, and I'm just so sorry I can't actually be with you in the flesh, so to speak. I'm actually, as you listened to me this morning, up near the Arctic Circle, lecturing in Norway. But I'm just so thrilled that I've got the opportunity to share with you for just a few minutes one or two ideas I have about airport capacity in our nation. And it's so marvellous to have a conference arranged, organised and put on that is neutral, that is saying we don't come with a hidden agenda, we're not on one side or the other, we are here to get the debate properly aired and properly understood. Because as with most controversial issues, the first victim of anything like this is usually the truth. So it's just great actually to have this opportunity, and well done everybody. When I was a Minister of State for Trade and Investment, I paid a visit to Incheon Airport in South Korea. And I was very impressed with it as an airport. But the thing that made a lasting impression for me actually was that the guy who showed me around said that, frankly, the capacity that it could cope with wouldn't actually be delivered until about 2050. I sort of mockingly said, well, that's a long time out. And he just looked at me with such peaceful eyes and said, not really. And, I thought that's exactly what the Victorians would do, isn't it? The Victorians would have such confidence in their future, in the future of our nation, that they would start building things that could cope with 50 years of expansion. And this is Asia's century, without a doubt. If the 19th century belonged to us, if the 20th century belonged to the United States, the 21st century does belong to Asia. And we, in the developed world, and especially we here in Britain, either have to get on that page and sort this, or our grandchildren will pay a terrible economic and social price. It is as simple as that. And governments of all colours have for so long kicked the question of airport capacity straight into the long grass, painted themselves into a corner and left it to the next lot. Well, we can't do that anymore. That is why this has to come to a head. Difficult decisions have to be made, and made quickly. Now, I am not somebody who's going to say we've got to do this but not that when it comes to building capacity for the nation as a whole. I'd like to see, and as a Brummie I'm bound to say this, I'd like to see expansion in Birmingham. I'd certainly like to see expansion at Stansted. I can't see why we're having a debate about whether it's Heathrow or Gatwick. Why not do both? But what we have to do is understand why, in my view, a third runway at Heathrow actually should be where we concentrate the effort and get it done. I think the biggest reason, as far as I'm concerned, is that we have to maximise the hub traffic. And whether we like it or whether we don't, people who will come in to use the hub and go straight out again, they will be coming to Heathrow. And therefore, whatever we try to do, and however polite we are, and however far-seeing we might be, if we don't maximise that potential, we will pay a price. Because if you're going to get more long-haul sectors created, if you're going to start being able to make London, the capital of the world in so many ways, a city-state probably as far as the rest of Britain's concerned, if we're actually going to maximise that potential, that wealth creation, the ability to generate profit, which generates tax, which builds schools and hospitals, if we're going to do it, we've got to make sure that so many flights, so many slots are used to go all over the world, and you won't get one to stack up profitably for an airline unless you actually use the hub traffic, the stuff coming in and going out again. You can't just rely on the passengers that are generated in the city itself. To do that, we need the incoming as well as the outgoing. We need to maximise the use of the reputation. That, to me, is probably the biggest reason why I'd stick with Heathrow. I think, secondly, actually, if we went down the estuary model, the only way it would work is if we closed Heathrow. You're going to have to force the airlines to get out to the estuary. To do that, Heathrow has to be shut, probably sold for building land. And it'll be quite interesting to see, actually, how many of the MPs at the moment who campaigned for no third runway at Heathrow because they're all local to that part of London, actually would suddenly be saying, well, you can't cause that job destruction out at Heathrow. You can't do that to my constituents. Well, I would say to them, you can't have it both ways. And you either have it so that you create the wealth in your constituency, or you go and create it somewhere else, but you force the airlines there, you've got to close Heathrow to do it. Now, when you think that 1 million extra passengers creates 1,000 jobs, in fact, airline growth and employment growth are directly proportional because of the nature of passenger traffic through an airport. 2 million additional passengers, 2,000 jobs. That's why, in my view, I would have airport capacity increased all over Britain, let alone just in South East England, and let alone just at Heathrow. You see, we've got to accommodate where we see our nation 50 years out. Our country was built for globalisation. We really do get it. I always think, the example I use is I'm proud to be a corporate ambassador at JLR, at Jaguar Cars. Now that is British engineering, built in Britain. It's got German management. It's got Indian long-term money. And its best markets are China and America. You wouldn't find that willingness to accommodate globalisation in the same way in France or America. It just wouldn't happen in the same way. That's a cracking example of why we should embrace what globalisation really means and what it can do for us. And route one to that is increased airport capacity as quickly as possible at Heathrow, because that's where you can get it done quickly. That's where you can get it done at all. Howard Wilson always had that great phrase about, if I've got an issue, I just form a Royal Commission and I'll kick it off there and it stays there for a few years. I worry that the Davis Commission has in some way got a little bit of that about it. The Tories, Liberals, they sort of managed to get it past the next election. Labour actually went back on all that work that Blair and Brown had done about getting the third runway at Heathrow done. And so you've got this political football again. And so Schiphol and Frankfurt, Charles de Gaulle and probably Madrid, when they're looking at making sure that their hub traffic can get loads of new flights off into Asia so they can grow their own economies much more quickly, more effectively, they just must think it's their birthday. They must look across the channel. They must look into Britain. The envy in so many ways, especially now as we're the quickest growing economy in the developed world. And they must just think, yeah, keep on scoring own goals, pal. Our grandchildren don't deserve that. Have a great conference. I'm sure not everybody in this room agrees with what I've said, but I know for certain that I hope it'll make sure you guys can actually debate and discuss in a neutral environment. Have a good time. Thanks very much.